Do we have too much government? We need to put people ahead of corporate profits.
This system is so lopsided.
This threat is a real threat to democracy.
And I think that's really important. That's something we haven't been doing in this country for a long time.
Where do you start? What do you do? How do you do it?
Access to Democracy is sponsored by Thomson Reuters, providing legal professionals with the intelligence, technology, and human expertise they need to find trusted answers. Products include Westlaw, Practical Law, and Firm Central legal practice management software for small law firms. Thomson Reuters, the answer company. Online at thomsonreuters.com. Access to Democracy is made possible in part by a donation from Firefly Credit Union. Firefly is the new name of U.S. Federal Credit Union, which has proudly served the financial needs of the Greater Twin Cities community since 1925. At Firefly, we guide our members forward and give them the power to chase dreams by delivering the financial solutions they need to get ahead. From checking accounts to mortgages, we'll light the way. We are Firefly Credit Union, and this is Life Illuminated. And Dr. Charles Crutchfield of award-winning Crutchfield Dermatology in Eagan, acknowledged as one of the nation's best physicians. A Minnesota native who trained at the Mayo Clinic, Dr. Crutchfield personally treats all patients and states that experience counts and quality matters. Crutchfield Dermatology. Look good, feel great, with beautiful skin.
As I just said, 17 years going into our 18th, 1,700 interviews answering a question by our guest, Mike Ciresi, who has been a guest on and off for probably 10 years.
I think that's right, Ellen.
And Mike Ciresi is always a pleasure and an education. He has so many legal credits, but I guess being voted as one of the top 10 lawyers in the United States would have to be up there with most of them. You have had some incredible verdicts. Your reputation, you have written, you are quoted and feared by a lot of opponents, but you represented...
I wouldn't say feared.
Just feared. Your wife, Ann, is really the power behind the throne.
That is absolutely correct.
But the Bhopal case, the famous case in which you represented the government of the country of India, which was a worldwide victory. The tobacco case, which brought in $7 billion, we say that with a B, to a recovery from the tobacco companies. And you recently, within the last year or so, you had another 2-point-something billion. I could throw those numbers around, but recovery, was it in a Starbucks case?
Yeah, it was. We represented Kraft against Starbucks for the stores that. What Kraft did is they developed Starbucks coffee line in the grocery stores and stores across the nation. Called the CPG channel, Consumer Product Goods, and they built up that business over a period of time pursuant to an exclusive contract. And in essence, Starbucks wanted to get out of the contract, and to get out, they had to buy it out, or if Kraft breached the contract, then they could claim a breach and get out for nothing. So they couldn't negotiate a price, so they claimed a breach, and we then, and I'm just reporting what's been reported publicly, they said that they felt that the business was worth about $750 million, and we said it was worth $2.8 billion, and we got $2.7 billion.
As usual, on that winning side. Now, for many years, you were actually the senior partner of Robbins Kaplan.
Correct.
Which is
then known as Robbins, Kaplan, Miller, and Ciresi.
Right.
Yeah.
The Miller part, I shouldn't have forgotten that. But
it was named after you.
the firm grew to offices all over the country, one of the most powerful in the country. 2 years ago, you announced that you were leaving to really set up, I guess what we would call a boutique firm, a small firm again. Small as you started, but you never forgot the little people, and you still don't. And you formed Ciresi Conklin.
Conlon, yes.
Conlon, excuse me. And you're downtown in Minneapolis. You started with what, 6 of
We
you?
started with 6 lawyers. We now have 9. We're going to try to build another great law firm, as we did in the past. But this is going to be a smaller firm. The law is changing dramatically, Alan, and as we see technology changing, artificial intelligence, et cetera, there's the practice is going to change and transform dramatically over the next 10 to 15 years.
Right in front of our eyes. We see it with law schools. We see it with law firms. How many big firms have gone out of business in the last several years? How many firms, big firms, I mean, when I'm talking big, I'm talking 500-600 lawyers, have merged. It's just a very changing world. I guess a lot of it's because of the IT world.
Well, it's part that. It's part the way you practice today is different than it used to be. You can go out and virtually build a firm overnight if you need to. There are a dramatic number of highly talented lawyers who actually don't want to work within the confines of the 4 corners of a law firm, and they are ex-federal clerks or clerks for Supreme Court justices of states or district court judges in states, and they want to practice out of their home, and they can do some of the research for dramatically less cost than you would if you were sitting in an office. So it's
And a
very
lot
easy to
quicker.
hire people like that.
A lot quicker.
I don't know if it's a lot quicker, but it's a lot less expensive, and clients know that, and so the firms are changing dramatically. The lawyers that you used to see that we used to say in the law that there was finders, minders, and grinders. Now, people found cases or found business, others minded it, and others grinded away doing the hard preliminary work. And some people were all 3, finder, minder, and grinder. Well, the grinders are sort of going by the wayside because with artificial intelligence and with the freelancing that you have going on, firms don't need to hire those in-house and charge $300, $400, $500 an hour to the clients who are not going to pay that for that anymore. And that is dramatically changing it. That's one component. The second component is the artificial intelligence that's taking place. So those two are adding to a dramatically different platform for law firms.
When I did practice back in New York, I used to do a lot of appellate work. And before I would argue an appeal, of course, working on the brief, you would come downstairs and see me in the library, and I might have 30 books open. Today, you bring it all up on the computer, and you take the computer right into the courtroom with you.
Right. You're hard-pressed to find a library in a law firm today, Alan, because that's wasted space. I mean, it's very
I
expensive.
saw it coming, and what I wanted to do was manufacture just book covers to put in a library so you could justify the fees with nothing in them.
Well, that wouldn't work today.
But that wouldn't work anymore. No. So, are there any particular specialties that Ciresi Conlon is?
Well, we're in litigation in all its forms, and we handle very, very large matters. We just got done with a significantly large matter that was confidential, and we represent ordinary people, like I always have, and we do it. I think much more economically in a smaller place. We can do that. We don't have all the overhead that a larger place has. And more importantly, we're free to take on a lot of stuff that we otherwise couldn't take on. So it's a firm of 9, at least 8 of them are highly talented, excluding myself. We've got just some extraordinary people, and it's fun. It reminds me a lot of when I first started in the old firm, which was then Robbins, Davis, and Lyons. And we had 2 offices in St. Paul and Minneapolis, and each office had about 14 lawyers. So, I was maybe the 28th, 29th, maybe 30th lawyer in the firm at the time, and it was small, and you'd get together a little bit like Boston Law, Alan. At the end on Friday night, you sit down You might have a glass of wine together and talk about all the cases, you know, and go over them and say what's going on this week. So
That's really
it's fun.
nice.
Yeah.
The intimacy is nice, and the ability to bounce off of a few people is nice, rather than have this division, this division, this division, the estates division, and
Right.
there's always some competition between these divisions. Who's the rainmaker? Who's bringing in the money, etc. So
Well, there's some of that tension in law firms, I think, but the good ones generally set up systems that they can get around that, and it all depends on the environment of the given firm, and all firms have a different culture. You know, at the old firm, we tried to inculcate a culture that we're all in it together, and a rising tide lifted all boats. That's the way it should be, because you can point to any of the cases that you mentioned, and it wasn't me. I mean, it was a team of people that were doing the work and collaborating together to get the results that we got. And I think that's an important part of the practice of trial practice, particularly. It's different than writing contracts, etc. I mean, trial work is really collaborative work. I mean, you need people coming at an issue, a problem, from different perspectives with a little different idea, and you got to sort of bounce off each other, and sometimes there's a little tension,
when
but
you
it's
took
good.
on the tobacco industry, when you did the research, the preparation that prepared you for the ultimate was monumental. How many 100,000 pages of pretrial discovery did you have to go through?
We had 33 million documents that were
33 million.
Yeah, that were produced by the tobacco industry. We were the only firm that actually went to trial, and we're the only one that did all the discovery in the litigation. That's across the entire country. In fact, the discovery we did and the documents that we were able to get disclosed are being used across the world today and across the United States in other litigation. And the documents themselves have resulted in hundreds of peer-reviewed medical articles because the research that was done by the tobacco industry was highly sophisticated. They had some really great scientists, and
But they sat on it.
they just weren't disclosing what they were
Right.
finding. Right.
The money was in selling cigarettes, not in telling people that they're bad for you.
Right. And, you know, the basically, that suit was about the children, because what the industry did is they targeted kids young. You have cohorts that move through their life. I mean, you start, kids start smoking as young as 12, and when they got to be 30, 35, some of them would drop off. They'd quit. They weren't addicted. Others did get addicted, and they continued to smoke all their life. But they have to replace the ones that were dropping off, so they'd go after the young people. So what the case was about was how they marketed and how they manufactured, because what they did is they manipulated the nicotine to make it more addictive. Those are the two prongs of that case.
And that's what resulted in that incredible recovery. And
Which the state is still benefiting,
Yes.
and will forever. So long as the industry is in business, it will continue to pay money to the state of Minnesota. And
Actually,
it's
it
upwards of
also-
about $160 to $170 million a year.
it also resulted in tobacco companies having diversify and go into other fields, which many of them have done now.
They are. Well, I think that when you look at the industry as a whole, you know, you're seeing these e-cigarettes, and now you're seeing new developments coming out. They're going to try to get away from the old type of cigarette, because it's being regulated across the world in ever-increasing degree, mainly because of what we did here in Minnesota. So they're looking to sort of transform their companies.
Mike is not the type of an attorney that necessarily you see on television. He's not the bombastic shouter. He's quiet, laid back, but really, really well prepared. And probably that preparation is as important as anything. But your demeanor is such that, you know, it just flies against much of what you see on television, which may play well, but isn't the real world.
It never helps to scream at people. I mean, you have to be, in the trial practice, you have to be prepared. And what I say is, they say, how do you do these things? I say, it's preparation, preparation, preparation. And that's what enables you to do a really effective cross-examination at trial, to make an effective opening statement or closing argument, or to put a good witness on the stand on direct examination. You have to be prepared. You have to know the case better than anybody else. You have to know areas of expertise even better than the experts do for what you have to put on in the witness stand. So that's very, very important. I've never, I've been practicing law for 45 years now almost, and bombastic people have never done well, quite frankly. I mean, they may think they do, but they really don't.
They do in literature. They do
in literature, yes.
They do in the
But
South.
there's sort of a license you can
Right.
take there,
But you are also a big Twins fan.
I am a big Twins fan. I am indeed.
Looking forward to this year. It looks like
I am. I
it.
think they, I'm cautiously optimistic. They made a big turnaround last year. It's been a little tough out there, Alan, last 4 years before that.
No, certainly
But
was.
last year they made a pretty good turnaround, and I think they're going to do even better this year. They certainly have the talent, and it takes a while. It's an interesting game.
Pitching,
Pitching,
which they
pitching.
have.
Yeah.
But they also have some power now.
Right. And the time to develop takes longer. That's really a hard game. I mean, hitting a baseball is probably, and this is from an old college football player, but I'll tell you, hitting a baseball is probably one of the most difficult things in sports. If that ball's coming at you, upwards of sometimes 100 miles an hour.
Today, absolutely.
And you have a couple seconds to make a decision, and that's it. 1,001, 1,002.
Yeah.
It's over.
Yeah, and of course the NFL is now, I don't know if there's litigation about the concussion situation.
There's a major settlement on it, and frankly, I'm not sure where that is. The judge disapproved the settlement at first, and then it went back, and they sweetened the pot a little bit more.
Well, he said it was too small.
Right, the judge did.
Money.
Yeah, she said it was too small, and then they went back, they redid the settlement, and I think it's going through the approval process right now. I think that's where it stands.
Of course, we're learning so much about concussions in football that we didn't know, and of course we're seeing it now in soccer also.
Well, hockey, soccer.
Hockey again, yes.
Football. We're learning as anything, as the human mind evolves, as we learn more, we become more sophisticated in the everyday activities that we engage in.
Well, hopefully the human mind evolves. As I'm looking at the Republican presidential race, I'm not sure that that's true, but I don't want to get you into politics.
No, I tried that. It wasn't very successful. But it is, I would say this, across the board, we have 23 million people in this country?
It might even be a little bit
And
more
I would
than
say
that.
this on both sides. This is the best that we have in the country. That's what I hear from most people, because most people are a little left of center to a little right of center. That's what they occupy. And they don't see anybody who they can vote for.
No, it is tough.
So they're relegated to taking the best of the lot, which isn't very good.
Well, I have a button that says "Feel the burn," so
Yeah, I will grant you that the Republican side is, it's almost beyond comprehension.
yes, it is. I don't know how they're going to choose one, unless they pick somebody from outside at their convention.
Well, I don't know if that'll do that. The interesting thing about it, Alan, is that when you sit back and if you just sort of look at the whole process, and you look at Sanders on the far left and, these folks that they have on the far right in the Republican Party, I look at the Trump supporters and the Sanders supporters, and there's a commonality there. There's a common thread, which neither side would admit, but there is, and that's the economics of the middle class.
The economics of the middle class, the fact that the middle class hasn't moved forward in over a decade, the fact that people are really disgusted with a Congress that lives for raising money and lobbyists, but doesn't seem to accomplish much.
Right, and I would suggest that neither party has done much for the middle class.
No, they haven't.
I would throw that out and let that be debated, because I really believe that. We've seen a lot of lip service that they want to help the middle class, but they really haven't. We're in a transformative time. The economy is changing dramatically with technology, and we're not educating our kids in the way we should be educating them. We're not providing opportunities for small businesses to grow and thrive. And everybody says they want to do it, but instead we all have slogans. It's the one percenters. I kept listening about this 1%, so I went and looked it up. In the last statistics from the Internal Revenue Service, et cetera, to be in the top 1%, you have to make, which is a lot of money, but you have to make $430,000 or something like that. Those are a lot of small business people. And they are putting people to work. They put 60% of our people to work in this country, upwards of 60% or more. And we have politicians who want to, hold them up as poster childs for something bad, instead of taking a look at the carried interest among Wall Street and stuff like this.
The problem
I don't
is
know. It's
hedge fund managers who make an obscene amount of money, and who controls, even the big banks, who controls our economy, and what are they doing? These trade agreements, which disturb me a lot, took so many jobs out of the country, industries out of the country. Something like 600,000 small businesses moved out of the country where people are getting inferior salaries. And
trade is good, but it has to be fair trade. And
Absolutely.
And that's where we've lost sight of what is fair trade and what do we write into these agreements.
Tariffs.
That allows...
That compete.
Right, that does not allow dragging everybody down to the lowest common denominator. That's been the problem, and we haven't effectively, I think, written the right type of trade agreements, and so you see all of these jobs being lost. On the other hand, a lot of jobs have been created by trade, so that's another factor that we have to look at.
And we do very little looking.
We don't. We're in the slogans. We're in silos.
Yeah.
We talk to people who talk like us, who think like us. We go out with people who talk and think like us. We don't.
And we know that they don't
get together
because they think like us.
Of course, they're absolutely right because they sound like us. So it's we're lacking the real leaders. That's what we're. That's what
I think an example of that is the Senate at the present time, with the vacancy caused by the death of Judge Scalia.
Right.
I mean, it really, to me, is embarrassing as a nation, irresponsible, diametrically opposed to the oath that these people took. Scalia was not even in the ground when Mitch McConnell said, there'll be no appointment this year.
The Constitution doesn't quite say that
Article 2, Section 1
doesn't say you can't consent during a presidential year. But on the other hand, if you look at the statements made by Democratic politicians in the past, including our present president, they didn't want to consent when the Republicans were in power either in the last years.
That would indicate a little bit of hypocrisy.
Well,
you can't possibly say that there's hypocrisy in government.
But your point is very well taken. I mean, the president has put up a good nominee. He's entitled to have his hearing. They should have the hearing, and they should vote up or down.
And that's it.
Yeah.
That's
too simple, though.
Even what the Senate has done
sense.
on these 60-vote majorities now, that's not what I understand the system to be. You've got 51, the other one's got 49, you win. In baseball, you don't have to win by 6 runs, you have to win by 1 run.
Well, part of our democracy in Washington has been the establishment of these rules by the Senate and the House that make it more difficult sometimes to get legislation through, that you look and you say, where did this come from? Well, it came from by and large, an agreement between the parties that the party who is in the minority, you need 60 votes to get something on the floor, and et cetera. So that's not what the Constitution intended, but that's what's
and
evolved.
It filters down to the state also, where we do have a surplus, where we know that our infrastructure is crumbling. We know that we have so many problems. Let's do something to fix it up for
Yeah, you know,
everybody.
your point is really well taken, Alan. I've been sort of surprised looking at this and really amazed. If we look at since 2008, we've had the lowest interest rates in our lifetime.
Right, absolutely.
And what better time to borrow to rebuild the infrastructure, which serves multi-generations. And so we would pay for part of that, our children would pay for part of it, our grandchildren would pay for part of it, because you'd bond it long-term.
Right.
And we would be rebuilding the infrastructure, creating, by the way, along the way, tremendous jobs for people
See
to work
also
at.
Roosevelt and the CCC.
Right.
I mean, see also Eisenhower and the
The
federal highway system.
interstate highway system,
Yeah.
right?
But, yeah, so that to me is very frustrating, and it's like a voice crying out in the wilderness.
That's why where I've seen really effective things done to bring people up, it's been in the private sector. There's a little more common sense that tends to be at play, you know.
Public-private partnership results in Egan TV,
Right.
who are housed here in the Thomson Reuters building. We have the Egan personnel who run the station. It has saved both entities a substantial amount of money. Thomson built the studio, Egan supplied the equipment, and
You inform the public, I mean, yeah, you know, you have a lot of
we have
elected
programs like
officials
this on ETV, and Thomson gets to use the talented personnel for their worldwide conferences, basically early in the day, and has worked just wonderfully.
Yeah.
And
sort of
yeah.
a common sense approach to things.
very, very proud to say, you know, as we have 4 years of this now, it's been really good. So what's down the road for Ciresi Conlon?
Well, we, you know, we're going to continue to represent all segments of our society. We believe that our tagline is protect the future. We believe that when we're protecting the future for our clients, we're protecting it for society. We take cases on that people need help on. Folks who can't afford lawyers, we take those on, and we represent very
Which
large
you have
companies.
always done.
Always
you
done.
have come from humble beginnings, and you have never forgotten it, as opposed to many.
Well, I was brought up that way, Ellen, as I think you were too. I mean, my father had a 7th grade education, as you know, and my mother died when I was in 7th grade of breast cancer. Family surrounded us, and, you know, we had to work. And people gave us a lot, gave us opportunity, and I think that's how society advances. I mean, that's your role, that's my role,
And
to
that's
do well while doing good.
the frustration.
Yeah.
Mike Ciresi, always a pleasure.
It's great to be
talk
here
to
again.
you, and I thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Alan. Nice to see you again.
And